Hi everyone, welcome back to Sandra's Home. Today I've got a psychotherapist on the channel. Her name is Jen Mak, and we're here to talk about bereavement. So I'll just be asking her a couple of questions and she'll be answering it, and then we'll just go through it and see what we can find out. So, Jen, would you like to say anything before we start?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to be able to share an understanding of the grief process. I think a lot of the time people worry about um, if they're doing it properly or how to support someone. So it's great that you have this platform for people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So, the first question that I wanted to ask would be, what would you or how would you define grief? Because I know because people go through it differently. Sometimes we feel like, maybe we're not actually grieving or someone else is not grieving because they're not
Yeah.
expressing it the way that we want them to. So, how would you define grief?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because grief is very much a personal and very unique experience. So outwardly, someone might betray a certain response, and you may mistake that as, oh, they're over it, they're not grieving. Grief I see as being both the kind of immediate reaction, but also the continuous kind of responses to a loss, whether that be a loss of a person. Um, from passing away or from a breakup or loss of a job, or even like kind of our situations now where we've lost certain parts of our lifestyle, or there might be a part of your life that you expected to have but you can't do. So there's sort of those kind of future predicted losses as well as things that you've gained and lost.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, with the grief, obviously we've all heard about like the 5 stages of grief. And the question I wanted to ask about that, do people go through them like in that order? Do people usually go through it in that order, like in the stages, or do people go through part of it or some of it and then like how does it work?
Yeah. So 5 stages of grief is one particular kind of way of modeling grief, but it's only a model, so it's not necessarily the absolute kind of template for someone's grieving process. Um, so people generally will go through this state of like shock and denial, and then where I've seen people kind of get stuck in their grief process is they're not able to be particularly angry or not particularly sad. So it's almost like these certain emotions kind of stop them from being able to go forwards in some sense. But the thing to keep in mind is each person's journey is unique to them. So for instance, if someone's passed away and they're dealing with the practical things of like the funeral arrangements, they might not have that opportunity. They might not feel like, oh, I can't break down now, I've got to hold everything together. So there are certain reasons why, in a sense, those stages that come at different points. And the other thing to know is it's not like there's one loss either. So for instance, if you think of a breakup, as well as the loss in terms of the relationship itself, you've also got loss in terms of trust in people, potentially the loss of a home, a loss of your other friendship circles, different lifestyle habits. So it's those different things also have their own kind of different stages of grief as well. So you might have been able to move on in some sense with some aspects, but other parts are still, you don't realize until it actually happens to you
Yeah.
that's part of that grief for you as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how would you say like it would last for like going through grief? No, people go through it different ways, like you said. How long does it usually take? Because I feel like sometimes people give themselves like a limit or a time to like get over whatever went through them.
Yeah. It's really sad because some people for whatever reason, somewhere down the line, someone's thought, I'll give myself a year, or it's been years. Why do I still tear up when I talk about it? And for me, I don't think grief's not linear, and it's very much a fluid thing. So there'll be moments where that particular story is really triggering or particularly sensitive to it. So for instance, like it was Mother's Day recently, so losing your mom is going to be horrible potentially for a long time, but there'll be moments where that pain is really hard to deal with because of potential reminders. So it fluctuates really. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, like if you've grieved or you feel like you've grieved, and then let's say the same problem comes up, like 5 years later after the event, and it comes back and makes you feel like, okay, did I actually finish grieving? Did I not? Like, what do you do in that situation when you feel like, okay, you actually didn't go through it when you thought previously that you were over it?
Yeah, I think it's hard to know. I don't think it's not tidy. It's not necessary. There's nothing at the end of it that no one's going to give you a clear certificate and says, oh, you've done grieving, everything's done. So there'll be certain situations when you kind of come close to a similar situation, understandably you will potentially be quite scared of things happening in a certain way again. So for instance, like with relationships, as it gets more serious, there's more to lose, but also that fear of having to deal with the loss again if things go wrong. And it might trigger memories of what has happened before, because in a sense your brain is trying to kind of protect you and just like, oh, watch out for that. And so it's hard to know really, to say, is that because it's giving you a warning in a try and be safe way, or is it reminding you because actually it's still something that is still very sensitive to you, and whether you need more support with it.
So how do you work through that to make sure that you're not like overprotective of yourself because of what you've gone through? That way, at least you can get back to like a bit of a normal life. How do you work through that?
So in terms of like how, like when I've seen people when they've come to me for support with grief, it's because they feel stuck and they're not functioning as well as they'd like to day to day. So it might be they get caught with this, all of a sudden they're starting to cry and they can't control those emotions, for instance. And so for me, it's very much about having the opportunity to go between the two of like feeling very sad, but also being able to enjoy parts of life after. And that takes time. And I think when someone gets stuck in one or the other, that's when there can be a problem. So if someone's so consumed by sadness that they can't see any hope for the future, that's a place of stuckness as well. But there's also, if they're in a sense of denial, if they just completely focused on work and don't deal with home life, for instance, then that's also a sign that something isn't quite right as well. And it's not necessary for someone to be open about what's going on to everyone. It's just having an outlet somewhere. So whether that be with one or two friends, or with a therapist, or even just with yourself, but privately in, like, I don't know, journal writing, it's just having some kind of outlet. Otherwise that emotion will kind of get stuck.
Of course. So tying into that, with you said to have like friends that you can talk to
Mm.
and stuff like so with people like friends, what would you
Mhm.
suggest for them to do to be able to help someone go through grief? Because sometimes they feel like we don't like they don't know what to do to make that
Yeah.
person feel better.
So on that, the tricky thing is people worry about making someone upset or oh I've made you cry. But the thing to remember is that person's already crying anyway. They're
Yeah,
just not outwardly showing it potentially, or they've not really had the opportunity to. So actually it could be a positive thing that they're showing that sadness in front of you.
of course.
And also to recognize sometimes we can't make things better for friends, that they have to go through this period where it's absolutely horrendous and absolutely horrible. And as much as we want to help them get through it as quick as possible, we have to be patient and we have to kind of hold that hope for them, but quietly. When someone's in that kind of grieving process, time feels like it's slowed down, even though logically in their head they might feel like, I know that in time I'll be okay, but right now it's just too much. So whether it's being a shoulder to cry on, there's also, you could also support them by just distracting them, helping them to just actually have a laugh. So watch a film, watch something funny with them, get them out the house, just get them out of that kind of loop of being stuck in their own thoughts, really. And then I guess the other thing is just sometimes asking how you are is a tricky question.
Yeah,
So trying to show that you're thinking about them without kind of pressure, any kind of pressure to respond. So it could be sending, I don't know, a funny picture, sending them music that you like, sending them some food, some flowers, that kind of thing. So it's that showing that you thought about them, but they don't need to respond to you at any time soon.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank
Yeah.
you. I wanted to also ask, in terms of like going through grief as well, does it can it trigger or start any mental health issues that you could potentially go through but not realize? Could they
Yeah.
start it? Mhm.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg, because I think if you're feeling, when you're going through a grief process, there are certain habits that you might stop doing as well as you used to. So you might not eat as well, you might not sleep as well. And those different factors will contribute to your mental health be potentially getting worse and worse. Conversely, the other way, if you've already if you're already at risk because you're already struggling with, say, depression or anxiety, those kind of mental health illnesses might give you the sense that, oh, I can't speak to my friends, they'll think I'm a bother, or I don't want to go outside. So those things kind of on top of what you're already struggling with will possibly exacerbate that grief process.
Yeah. All right. Um, so if someone is going through that, and obviously you said to speak to friends or get someone to speak to professionally, I feel like sometimes that's not always available, especially with the pandemic happening. And
Absolutely.
yeah, not being able to go outside or people losing their jobs and not being able to even afford to speak to a psychotherapist or
Mm-hmm.
just anything in
Yeah.
general. What would you suggest? Like, is there anything else they can do to kind of go through the process and lift themselves up?
Yeah. Watch TV, watch films, watch, like, it may hurt, but stories that resonate with what you're feeling can maybe help you to feel those feelings. Um, there are helplines. So Samaritans is a popular one, although it's to do with, people might know it in terms of suicide, but it's there for anyone who just wants to vent and talk to someone. So there's Samaritans, which is free. There's Cruise, which is a national bereavement focused charity as well. Couple of things to explore, art and writing, just that kind of creative expression, if it's something that you already do, or even if you don't, just trying to, part of it is almost like trying to get that kind of energy, that anger, that sadness, just getting it out onto something else. Listening to music and singing really loudly, just finding ways to vocalize and express what you're feeling.
Thank you. So whilst doing all of that as well, how do you know if you're actually grieving properly? Like if you're doing it right, how do you know? Because I feel like sometimes you can think in your mind, okay, I am grieving, I am doing what I need to do, and then like a couple months down the line, it just all bubbles back up again, and you feel like you're back to zero. How do you feel? How do you assure yourself that you're doing it properly? They're going through.
It's a difficult question to answer, because different people benefit in different ways. Different people exercise in different ways. Different people process food in different ways. So I think what's key is just to be kind to yourself. So it's hard to know whether certain thoughts or feelings are there because you're struggling to process something, or whether that's actually just a natural part of the process. So for instance, with grief, most of the time it's not a good idea to intervene too early in terms of professional help, because grief is it's horrible, but it's a natural part of life, and there's a recognition that a lot of that healing needs to be done, will naturally happen. So for instance, if you broke your leg, doctors know there's a certain period of time, certain kind of stages in that kind of recovery that are kind of normal, and it's only afterwards that, if there's still a niggling issue, then you might need professional help. So same with grief, people will go through this kind of natural process, and it may feel like it's taking forever, it may feel like you're going forwards and then backwards, but that's actually normal. It's normal to kind of fluctuate between these kind of highs and lows. I think I would only really worry if you feel like you feel numb, you feel like you feel like, or other people see an impact. So if people at work are noticing things are not kind of, you're not yourself anymore, you've got to give yourself a chance to recover.
Of course.
But if that's still happening, then that might be a time to get some additional support.
Okay. So what you're saying is, like from the beginning, you should try and like do it yourself, because it's obviously natural, like you said. And then if it just gets persistent, or if you feel like it's getting worse, then to get professional help.
Yeah, and when I say do it yourself, I mean do it with the support of family and friends.
Of course, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's about every question that I wanted to ask. Would you want to, do you want to say anything else to anyone?
No, not I can think. I think I've covered everything that I can think of. It's just to really emphasize that it is very much a personal journey. And for instance, like whenever I've gone through a grief process, I always remember how plants grow, and they take forever, and you don't see them growing, but you see them like weeks later. You spot a bud, and you notice things weeks or months later, and things are happening, but in that moment it can you might not notice it, but you've just to hold on to that hope that things will change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So that'll be everything for the interview. Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today. And well, I'm gonna link some stuff on the box about the Samaritans and anyone that needs help with grieving. Thank you so much for joining. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Okay. Okay, so that's everything.